There's actually a little prize. So if you can answer either finish the slogan or tell me what company uses the slogan, then I have a bucket of candy that Marlon so bewilled to me this morning. So, okay, there's a company that says this: it's my life, my card. My life, my card. Anybody know what company that is? It's a little bit difficult one, so I'm starting off hard. It'll get easier. So that is the American Express slogan. Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. Well, you don't win because you didn't say it. Okay, so now we've gone from very difficult. This one's going to be very easy. Yes, I'm loving it. Come get a piece of candy. So, of course, McDonald's, I'm loving it. Here's the company. I'll give you a hint. It's a car company. And they say, never follow. I didn't know this one, so I don't blame you. That would be Audi's slogan, never follow. Image is everything. Come get some candy. How about this? You deserve a break. Whoever said it first, come on up. Don't be shy. Oh, you guys won't ever get this one. Have it your way, okay, or my way, I suppose. So now so Marlon, was that you? No? Who was it? Come up and get some candy. Don't be shy. Now, the second part of that is, what company is that? Very good. Come get your candy. See, this is fun, isn't it? Ben should leave more often. Does Ben give you guys candy? I'm going to talk to him about that. Okay, how about this one? Because you're... No? Because you're... Think about buying something for yourself. Because you're worth it. Sally, come get some candy. Oh, this is a good one. We're going to end with this one, so everybody be ready. You are what this is all about. All right, good job. Everybody give yourselves a hand. Yeah, all right. So we live in a world that's very self-centered. We think about ourselves a lot. In fact, I heard this in a sermon the other day that girls think about other girls more than they think about themselves. Do you know why that is? Because they want to be like the other girls, or they compare themselves to other girls. Guys don't have that problem, but girls apparently do. I don't know. It's a statistic. Either way, we think about ourselves a lot. We think about, what would it be like? What would it take for me to make myself happy? What would it take for me to be content with whatever's going on, whatever situation there might be? The problem with that is it's not that we don't want ourselves to succeed. It's not that we don't want to do good things or have nice things. The problem is that we put ourselves in a position where we just don't belong. I don't know about you, but if you think about it, if you are your own God, are you doing a very good job? Seems to me like I make a very terrible God. But there is one who doesn't, and that's Jesus. So what we're going to talk about this morning is why we take the mirror away from us and instead look to Jesus. What would it be like if in our lives we quit worrying about us so much and began to focus on Jesus for who he is and for what he's done? You guys have I think something in your bulletin. If you want to follow along and take notes, you can. Certainly don't have to. I'm not sure that I'll even be able to stay on this, so I'll try. But you never know what can happen in an hour and a half, so we'll see what happens. Oh, there it was. There was the laugh. I knew it was coming. Let's read Colossians chapter 1. Turn to Colossians chapter 1, towards the back of the New Testament. It's a small book. small letter, I should say. It's got 4 chapters. We're going to read Colossians 1, verse 15 through 20. I think your handout says 15 through 18, but that's my mistake. It says here, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross." We're going to stop there. What I want you to focus on is this word preeminent. So write down preeminent. It should be in verse 18 for you. The word preeminent literally means, write this down, to have the first place. To have the first place. So when we talk about all these slogans, we're trying to put us in the first place. But we can't, for some reason, get to the first place and stay there. It seems like when we get to the first place, there's always something one notch higher that comes along, and we want to try to get there to be in the first place. We want to try to go one notch higher, and we're going to always keep working to try to get to the first place. We might seem like we can get to the first place for a while, but it's a fleeting thought. So we're going to find out what it takes to be preeminent, what it takes to have the first place. I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to spoil it a little bit, that only one can have the first place. Okay? And that's Jesus. Let's find out what Jesus accomplished that gave him first place. Start in verse 15. It says this: "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation." Let's just take that. He is in reference to Jesus. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Does anybody know what Genesis 1 and 2 says? In the beginning what? Okay, and then what's verse 2 say? Oh, see, we're good at the first one. I have to look it up too, don't feel bad. All right, here it is. "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." It says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That Spirit that it's talking about is God the Father. So the Bible, we could go through, I won't take a lot of time, but we could go through and we could see that God the Father is Spirit. We cannot see Spirit. Okay? Let's draw that conclusion right away. Now, let's go to Hebrews chapter 1. You guys want to turn there real quick, and then we'll come back to Hebrews 1. I'll tell you what, let's keep your finger there. Let's go to John chapter 1, and then we'll come back to Hebrews chapter 1. So John chapter 1 and verse 1 through 3 says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him there was not anything made that was made." It says that in the beginning was the Word, and it's a capital W. Do you see that in your Bibles? The reason that the Word is capitalized is because it's a name of somebody. Who is the name? Jesus. So Jesus was in the beginning, okay? He was with God, and it says that he was God, correct? He was always in the beginning. He always has been, okay? Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Now, Hebrews chapter 1, remember that? Let's turn back there real quick. It says this in verse 3. Jesus, He is the radiance of the glory of God, and He is the exact imprint of His nature, and He upholds the universe by the word of His power. It says that He's the exact imprint, correct? That means that He is the precise reproduction of God. He is in every aspect, Jesus is God. He is the picture that we can see in flesh of God. God sent Jesus into the world so that we might know who He is. Okay? John 1:18. Don't turn there. Let me turn there real quick, but let me read this to you. John 1:18 says this. No one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side has made Him known to us. So no one has ever seen God. Would you agree? Now, in the Old Testament, I don't know if you remember this, but God met with the people of Israel in a few different ways. What are some of those ways? Okay. Okay, so a cloud. Okay, what else? A pillar of fire. What else? A burning bush. What else? On the mountain. Okay? There's one more thing I can think of. It's not necessarily a visible thing. It says that when God spoke to the people, that it sounded like what? Thunder. So God has revealed Himself from the beginning of time to us, and He revealed Himself in visual ways to some, but not in like human form. Not until Jesus. So Jesus is the visible picture of God. The first thing that you need to understand is that Jesus is the visible picture of God. This is the first step to becoming the preeminent one. So I don't know how you're lining up so far, but I fail at this level. Okay? It says in verse 16, for by Him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether it's thrones, dominions, rulers, or authorities, all things were created through Him and for Him. The second point is that Jesus is the eternal creator. He is the eternal creator. Jesus has always been. We saw in John 1 that in the beginning was the Word. It doesn't say that in the beginning God made the Word. It says in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. So Jesus was in the beginning. And it says that all things were made through Him, and without Him there was nothing made that was made. So Jesus was in the beginning, forever and ever and ever eternal, and He made everything. Let's see. Can we make things? Can we make things? Michael, have you ever built a house? So would you say that we can make things?
Construct things.
Okay. Well, let's use the word make. Okay. So we can make things. Like I could make a cake. It won't be very good, but I can make a cake. What do I need, however, in order to make a cake? Ingredients. I have to have something to start with, right? If Mike's going to build a house, he needs lumber. If I'm going to make a cake, I need ingredients. I need flour, I need sugar, I need milk, I need eggs. See, when Jesus made things, he needed nothing. Jesus made everything out of nothing, and he made everything perfect. That's what he did. He didn't have to make an excuse as to why it didn't taste right. He didn't have to make an excuse as to why the house was a little bit tilted to the side. I'm not saying that you would do that. That would be my house. God created everything through Jesus, and everything was perfect. So, if I'm going to be the preeminent one, first of all, I need to be the visual picture of God. I need to be the exact replica, the exact imprint in every aspect of God, which I am not. I also need to be the eternal creator. Because if I can be the eternal creator, that means that everything underneath me is subject to me. I cannot be the eternal creator. Now in verse 17 it says this, that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Maybe your version says that all things exist. All things hold together. Jesus is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So, being before all things means that he pre-existed, or that he is superior to all things. So, let's name 3 things that are not included in all things. Okay, good. So that means that Jesus is before and superior to all things, including us, including our own sinful desires, including the way that we want to make ourselves feel good or whatever. Jesus is superior to all that. And it says that in him all things hold together. I don't really know how to explain this in a simple way. So if you'll forgive me, I'd like to read you an article from Discover magazine. And it's about nuclear physiology. Okay? This is called the glue that holds the world together. Now, I want you to understand something. The Bible was, written, these letters were written 2,000 years ago, okay? This was written 10 years ago. This is a story about scientists who are trying to figure something out. And it has to do with this thing called a gluon. So, we're going to take a look at everything from an atomic level. All right? It says this, that Frank Wilczek was 21 years old when he graduated from Princeton University, and he helped develop the theory of the proton in 1973. He did not really understand it himself at first. He was just following where the math led him. He said, we did the calculations, but we didn't have a simple, intuitive answer or understanding. The physical picture came later. The picture even took a while for physicists to absorb because it really isn't simple. Even today, if you ask a physicist to describe a proton, you'll get a cartoon version. The one that says that a proton is made up of 3 smaller particles called quarks. That description is not exactly false, it's just low resolution. I'm going to spare you from most of this, but... So he goes on to explain how an atom is made up, and that an atom is made up of a nucleus, protons, neutrons, and electrons. Okay? So he says that there's a theory that they could probably reproduce this, but they haven't verified that yet. In the end, even the scientists at Brookhaven won't be able to finally answer the question as to where protons come from. A central mystery will remain. Inside a proton, as gluons come and go, and quarks and antiquarks come and go in their numberless swarms, one number always remains constant. There will always be 3 more quarks than antiquarks, and those quarks at the very crudest level make up a proton. The closer you look, the more you will find the proton is dissolving into little particles, each of which is carrying very, very little energy. And the element of reality that triggers the whole thing, the quarks, are these tiny little things in the middle of the cloud. In fact, if you follow the evolution to an infinitely short distance, you'll find that the triggering charges go to 0. If you really, really study the equation, it gets almost mystical. Now, that may not make a lot of sense, but let me try to explain it to you. So a golf ball, if you took a golf ball and you wanted to do a size comparison, a golf ball would be the size of the nucleus of an atom. The electrons fly around the nucleus at a 100-mile radius. Okay? So a golf ball, and then a 100-mile radius, you have electrons. So if we were holding the golf ball, we wouldn't even be able to see the electrons. Okay? Now, drop that down to a 0.1 trillionth of an inch, and that's an atom. Inside the atom, there are protons and neutrons. There has to be a certain number of protons versus a certain number of neutrons. They have to work together, and in the very center of there's this little thing that they're calling a gluon. They don't really know what it's made of. They can't explain it. It always stays the same. It never changes, but they have no idea what it is. But I just read that in him all things hold together. Is that right? So it seems to me that the Bible has the answer that they're looking for, but then he goes on to in his article that says we're going to have to try different things. We're going to have to try new things that we haven't tried before to try to figure out what this is. The problem is that the one new thing that they don't want to try is this. This holds the answer. It's very clear. Jesus is the gluon that holds everything together. If Jesus were to let go for 1 minute of one atom, do you know what would happen? You would disintegrate. Jesus holds your life in his hands. Every second of your day is not unnecessary. Every trial that you go through is not unneeded. Everything that you do, God has complete control of. And if for 1 minute he did not and he let go, you would be gone. If God holds everything together, so that I'm talking invisible and visible, the things he created, trees, air, gravity, what are some other things that we can see and not see? People. Wind. Perfect. What else? A couple more. Clouds. Anybody else? Okay. One more. Animals. All these things that we can see and we cannot see, God created them through Jesus. And in Jesus, every single one of those things holds together in its perfected state that it is in this broken world by one person, Jesus. And if he lets go for 1 minute, it's all gone. It's all gone. So I need to be the picture of the eternal God. I need to be, what's the next one? The eternal creator. I need to be the glue that holds everything together if I want to be numero uno. How are you guys doing on that? So far, I'm still failing. Let's go on here. It says, Jesus is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. Now, a couple of times you're going to see this word firstborn in your passage. Do you guys see that? Let me explain something to you. Jesus was never born. Now, Jesus was born into the human world through Mary, okay? But Jesus has always existed. He existed up until forever. There was never a time that he didn't exist. So the fact that he came as a man, he did that for our benefit, but he didn't have to. He's always been. So this is not talking about Jesus being born, especially when it says at the beginning in verse 15 that he's the firstborn of all creation. He's certainly not the firstborn from creation. In fact, what that means is that he holds a special place. He is the author of that. So in the Old Testament, when you hear about the firstborn, the notation of that is that they have a special place. They get the first and the best of whatever their father has when he's gone. Okay? The birthright. Here it says that he is the firstborn from the dead. And I just want to touch on this for a minute. Do you think Jesus was the first to ever raise from the dead? No. We know that Jesus personally raised numerous people from the dead while he was on the earth, correct? We also know that when Jesus died, the Bible says that the tombs were open and people came out. So when Jesus died, people rose from the dead. So Jesus is not the first to raise from the dead. However, Jesus is the first to raise from the dead on his own power. So I need to be able to raise myself from the dead on my own power. I need to have the power to conquer death and sin and come back from the grave on my own. I fail at that. It says that Jesus is the head of the body, the church. So this church, First Baptist Church in New Hartford, Jesus is the head of this church. He says that he will grow his church, that he will build his church. He needs to be the front stage person in this church. If at any time at First Baptist Church, New Hartford, Iowa, Jesus is not the head of the church, this church will be gone. If you go to Revelations chapter 2 and 3, you'll read about 7 churches. These 7 churches had a problem. They all ran away from what God wanted them to do. And if you go look for those churches now, they do not exist. Jesus said to them, he said to the church at Ephesus, if you do not come back to me and begin to love like you did at the beginning, then I'm going to remove your lampstand. So the lampstand was the church. It was the light in the community. And he says, if you don't do what I ask you to do, I'm going to remove your lampstand. Nobody will ever know that you were ever here. If you go to where Ephesus was now, you will not find any remnant of that church. Jesus needs to be the head of the church. In fact, he is the head of the church, whether we put him there or not. It says that he is the origin of all things, the first to come back from the dead on his own power, and that in everything he might be preeminent. So, Jesus is preeminent. It doesn't say that so if you'll let me, I can be preeminent. It says so that in all things he might be preeminent. And that might is not a question, that is a statement. He will be, or he is preeminent. So I wonder in our own lives what that looks like. Is Jesus really preeminent in your life? Do you really give Jesus the first place? Or do we often take that place away from Jesus? Do we often say, no, I'm going to do what I want to do today? No, I'd rather skip that Bible study, or I'd rather not go to church because the football game is on, or I'd rather not talk to this person about Jesus who obviously needs Jesus, but I don't really want to do that. That's uncomfortable for me. Do we take away or try to take away the first place that Jesus has? So Jesus did these things so that he had preeminence. So that whenever you make a lame excuse, it holds no water. So that every time that you come up with something that you're going to try to lay down and say, here's why, Jesus, he's going to say, not good enough. I don't remember where you were when I laid the foundations of the earth. That's what God asked Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations? When I put everything in order, where were you, Job? Because Job tried this. He tried to come up with excuses as to why he could argue with God, and God smacked him. He said, no, you got nothing. So in our life, where are we? Where is Jesus? It says that for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. It says that he wanted to reconcile to himself all things. So what is not in all things? All things, whether in heaven or on earth. He wants to bring everything back to a place of harmony. He wants to bring everything back to a place where let's put it this way, when you're born, you have no relationship with God. You are born into a world where you will sin. You cannot help it. And that moment that you sin, you have separated yourself completely. And God says, because you've sinned, I cannot even look at you. You talk to me, I don't hear you. He says in Isaiah that when you pray, I can't even begin to think about your prayer because you're nothing to me at this point. You're sin, and I cannot be a part of sin. But then he gives us the option of Jesus. And he says, now, but Jesus came, and he died on the cross. He lived a perfect life so that if you would believe that he is God, that he did raise from the dead on his own power, that he is the eternal creator, that he is all these things, the glue that holds everything together. If you would believe that, then you can have eternal life, no matter what your life may have been before. God doesn't want you to get better and then come to him. He wants you where you are. So you see, he came, and this was written before any of us were born. Is that right? I know that I heard this morning we had some older people in our church, right? But I don't think any of us are old enough to go back and say, well, no, I was alive here. So that means that Jesus accomplished all of this prior to your existence on earth. Is that a correct statement? So that means that if he did all this so that he could reconcile you and him, that it doesn't matter what you've done, it doesn't matter where you've been, because he already knew you would be there and have done that. Paul writes this letter, and he writes multiple letters to different places, and the one thing that he reminds people of the most is this. You remember my past, he says. I used to persecute the church of Jesus Christ. I used to give the orders to have them drug out of their homes and stoned to death. I used to take these Christian men, women, and children and throw them in jail, make them slaves, beat them until they were almost dead, and then leave them. That was what I did, Paul said. The people who Jesus loved and came for and gave his life for were the ones that I was killing. But then he said, as though one untimely born, God decided it was time to show me his son. And when he met Jesus for the first time, his entire life changed. Things didn't become about him anymore. They were about Jesus. God wants us to understand and to know that he wants us. He wants us to put him first. He doesn't want us to try to put ourselves first. Do you understand that God, his desire for you is for good? His desire for you is good. Jeremiah 29 says that his desire for you is good. God is not a God who sits upstairs with a hammer waiting to thump you every time you do something bad. In fact, he says, when you find yourself in sin, run to me. Here's what I try to do, and this is just me being honest. When I find myself in sin, I feel like I need to get myself right before I go to Jesus. I feel like I kind of have to grieve over my own stupidity for a while before I go to Jesus, but that's not what he's asking us to do. He's saying, when you find yourself here, run to me. You make a horrible God, Pete. Run to me. Let me take that. Let me do that. Someday we're all going to stand before God, and we're going to have to give an account for what we did with Jesus while we were here. You have two options. One is to hand God the resume of his own son. And when he says, what did you do with my son? Or why should I let you into my heaven? You can say, well, this is Jesus' resume. He told me to give it to you when I got here. That's going to be enough. When I have put all of my faith and my trust for my eternal soul in Jesus' hands, and I stand before God, he will say, that is enough. But if I go with my own resume that shows all the stuff I've done my whole life, and then, but see this side over here, this is the good things I did. I tried to do this, right? Well, unfortunately, he's going to say, that doesn't outweigh each other, and you're going to have to leave because I don't even know who you are. We make horrible gods. We need to make Jesus the first place in our life. So what are you going to do with that today? What are you going to do with Jesus today? Are you going to make sure that he's preeminent in your life, in your home, when you go to work, when you're by yourself and your integrity's at stake? Are you going to be thinking that Jesus is preeminent in my life? Or are you going to be thinking that, you know what, nobody's looking, and I can do this, and I think I'll get by with it. And guess what? You might get by with it for a while, but you won't get by with it forever. Maybe you're here this morning and your life has consisted of ups and downs. And believe me, I know that when we come here, we bring struggles, we bring hurt, we bring pain, brokenness. Okay? Every one of us deals with this on a daily basis. So I'm not assuming that anybody is here and perfect. But maybe we've come from a lifetime of up and down and not really knowing where God wanted us or why God wanted us, or if we could ever be good enough for God to want us. Let me tell you, you can't. But God didn't send Jesus so that he could find the good people. He came for sinners like me. He came for sinners like you. Unjust, unworthy, unrepentant people. And he died without us submitting to him. It says that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. That joy was the day that you would put your pride down and put yourself down and say, I can't do this anymore. Jesus, I want you to take control. That's the moment, that's the joy that was set before him when he would see the people that he calls to himself come. So this morning, as you think about it, ask yourself where you are in relation to where Jesus wants you to be. And for the first time maybe in your life, right where you're at, just ask Jesus to forgive you for that, for whatever it is that you've been holding. For the first time maybe in your life, just say, Jesus, I don't even know what this is all about maybe, but I know that I need something more. I need you. And just let him take over. Let him be number one. Let's pray. God, I'm very thankful that in 1986, you called me out of darkness and put me into your marvelous light. I'm very thankful that despite my sin, you died for me. While I was still your enemy, you loved me. I ask for forgiveness in the places in my life where you're not number one. God, show me those areas and help me to fix it. Help me to elevate you to the proper place and help me to keep you there. God, we love you. We want change in our lives. Maybe there's some here that don't know you, but they need to. Would you just help them see that, help them take that brave step? Certainly no one would ever look down on them for making the most important decision of their life. Help us just to change. Help us to be brave. We love you.